You are listening to Wrestling Observer Live with your hosts, Brian Alvarez and Mike Sempervive.
Are you ready? Are you ready? Let's get it on!
Just me, everybody. Mike Sempervive here with you. How are you, Wrestling Observer Live? Brian Alvarez still in Hawaii. Still fired up, though. Subscribers of WrestlingObserver.com. Brian did a special Figure 4 Daily yesterday to get out his emotions on Monday Night Raw and Night 1 of the Superstar Shakeup. I want you to do the same today as we go into Night 2 from the Bell Center in Montreal, Quebec. SmackDown, Superstar Shakeup. Vince McMahon himself promising the biggest shakeup, literally the biggest shakeup, from the WrestlingObserver.com main webpage. Night 2 of this year's Superstar Shakeup is taking place tonight, and WWE is hyping that Vince McMahon will be making an appearance on the show. WWE has announced that Vince will reveal, quote, the biggest acquisition in SmackDown Live history tonight. Further details on who it will be have yet to be revealed. I'll run down the list after the break of everybody that was lost from SmackDown to Raw last night, including a couple names that I think may have been actually put up there accidentally, and all of a sudden we'll find out tonight never moved over. EC3, Eric Young kind of stand out in that. But as the story goes on to say, as was teased last week, Paige is also bringing a new team to the women's tag team division on tonight's SmackDown. WWE back at the Bell Center, where Sami Zayn is now hated, except not really. Although he did get the people to boo him pretty good last night. I didn't hate that segment as much as some people did. I want to hear what you thought about that, too, as well as many of the other things that took place, including the renaming of Hanson and Rowe, the War Raiders. Might be the biggest news of the day in wrestling. At least the most talked about, the Viking Experience. Yeah. Oh, and that music? AJ's also on Raw. But we'll get into all the names here in a minute. We'll be back, Wrestling Observer Live.
We some southern boys with the promise strength. Ain't nobody man enough to feel the pain. And you could be next. You better give respect.
Back here with you, as we are every day. Every single day. Wrestling Observer Live is here. Monday through Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, noon Pacific, 7 GMT. Sundays at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 Pacific, 10 GMT. American Forces Radio, TuneIn Radio, your portal, Sports Byline USA. You can follow them on Twitter at Sports Byline USA. Follow me at Sempervive if you've got anything to say. And at WONF4W. All you need to know for all the news in professional wrestling and mixed martial arts, including all of your podcasting needs. Want to join me? You can. 1-800-878-PLAY, 1-800-878-7529. Want to hear your thoughts on the Superstar Shakeup? I don't think everybody's gotten it out of their system about the Viking Experience yet. Might have been. This may end up going down as the biggest takeaway from Raw. I mean, if Lars Sullivan doesn't exactly pan out and, you know, things don't go, you know, too spectacularly and nothing really, I mean, what's everybody going to remember out of this? The Viking Experience. Not the Viking Express. Not just the War Raiders. Not just the Raiders, because I guess you would run into a little bit of a trademark infringement there with the Davis family. But the Viking Experience, Ivar and Eric. Look, the Undisputed Era, when first announced, also an awful name. Grew on me quickly, though. And it helps that the people involved make you forget about the name, and it's just Cole and Fish and O'Reilly and Strong, and they're all pretty awesome. Now, the War Raiders are pretty awesome, too, and what they do in the ring is going to, I would at least assume, make everyone forget about their terrible names, and we'll just probably be calling them Ivar and Eric a lot for those of us who will be able to do that. I still call Andrade Sombra sometimes, so, Rowe and Hanson, it's going to take me a little bit to kind of train my brain on that one. But, as Corey said, and was very emphatic about it, They're real Vikings. They eat raw meat, they make their own weapons, and they make their own clothes. That third one surprised me a little bit. It really did. And I'm wondering if we're going to have an angle at some point where Ruby Riott has lost a little bit of control on Sarah Logan, because her real mission in life is to go home and cook some of that raw meat, or at least I guess not cook it, but prepare it in a nice tartare strip for the men, and also start making the clothes. I don't know. It's a wacky name. But what they do in the ring should hopefully take care of that. But boy, was that the biggest news last night or what? It seemed like it. If I'm wrong, let me know. AJ Styles over on Raw, that being the probably the biggest name. Lacey Evans officially on Raw after being stuck in purgatory for a little bit. Same thing goes with Lars Sullivan and Ricochet and Aleister Black. EC3 is also on that list, looking as only he could look, getting destroyed by Braun Strowman. Brian and a couple other people have seemingly speculated that we could easily see EC3 back on SmackDown. I don't know why. One of the reasons that people have brought up is because, well, he was squashed. So, I don't think that was a beating on the way out the door. That could have just been a beating. I did get a kick, though, out of somebody on the board of F4WOnline.com. Did note that I'm not sure about Rhino's status, but with Eric Young going over, with EC3, with AJ Styles, and a couple other people, it is like the TNA Impact Championship family reunion. I wonder if Booker T still has that heritage title or whatever the hell that thing was. Coincidence? Or the return of Dixie? I doubt it's the latter. It's probably just a coincidence. No story as to why Eric Young has been broken up from Sanity, if he is broken up from Sanity. And one would figure he is broken up from Sanity since they weren't announced to be the members of the Raw roster. Naomi is over. As Kyle Lewis on Twitter noted yesterday, did the reverse Aunt Viv from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Sasha Banks out. Naomi in, teaming with Bayley. Sasha's got some time off to think, gather herself, consider going back on the Wendy Williams show. I'd go on the reel if I were her. The Usos, and also over on Raw. Andrade and Zelina Vega, Rey Mysterio Jr., Cedric Alexander, which completely blows my theory out of the water yesterday, talking about, it was either yesterday or Sunday, about Cedric. I would have figured if somebody was coming up from 205 Live, it would have been Buddy Murphy. I wanted Cedric to come up, or at least to have a chance to be featured more, because those two guys and Ali, and look, there's a lot of really talented guys on NXT. A lot of really talented guys on 205 Live, I should say. And they just don't get to play to a big enough audience. But unfortunately, hey, if they've accomplished everything they could down there, try to give them something else. And I don't know if Buddy Murphy, I don't know if he ends up on SmackDown tonight. I don't know if he ends up in NXT. I think either way it's good. Now that Cedric's over on Raw, as well as the rest of those folks, the question now is who ends up on SmackDown. Does Elias, can we bring out more people to beat up Elias on Raw? Has that run its course? Now we need to see him beat up on SmackDown? Said Buddy Murphy, said EC3 is being bandied about. When you lose a star, the level of AJ, how do you replace him? How do you fill him in? Do they move Drew McIntyre? A lot of people thinking they're going to move Braun Strowman over, which would do two things. One, it gets him out of the way of Lars Sullivan. Two, continues a tease that they had with he and Samoa Joe, which is, look, they've done some interesting things with Braun Strowman. And you think about where he was at a couple years ago, it's just, there's a lot that has not clicked there or has not worked itself out the way it probably should have. And him having matches with Samoa Joe is probably the best thing that could happen. I don't know how bad Daniel Bryan is banged up or whatever. I guess we'll find out if he comes out on the show tonight. But, like, Daniel Bryan being able to work around Brock Lesnar, or being able to work around Braun Strowman, can only help Braun. Braun being able to beat up another big guy in Rowan, his former running mate, I think is good. I do think Luke Harper is going to come back tonight because it only makes sense. And I also think Bobby Lashley and Lio Rush are going to move over. And in a way, that's really good for Lio Rush. I don't think Bobby Lashley's going to be Bobby Lashley, and he's going to get the reaction he's going to get. And I like Bobby Lashley. But we talk about it a lot with ROH, with guys like Matt Taven and Jay Lethal, and no matter how big of fans you are of those two guys, there are a lot of people out there where they're just missing that star quality, or they're missing something. And for a lot of people, whatever that something is, charisma, personality, facial, whatever. A lot of people feel that about Bobby Lashley. But Lio Rush being over to be able to mess with, guys more his, whether it be Daniel Bryan, Kofi Kingston, even, believe it or not, who I think would be a perfect opponent for Drew McIntyre if he came over. I think that would be a great way to start the Kofi feud, or to start Kofi's run as champion. But Lio Rush and Ali, Lio Rush, he's good in the ring. It's just him as sidekick getting thrown around, at the side of Bobby Lashley isn't going to help him out. But there are some guys on SmackDown who I'd like to see him face. After this break, we can get into a little bit about who Vince McMahon's big surprise may be. If you want to join me, you can. 1-800-878-PLAY. We'll be back. Brian Myers, a.k.a. Kurt Hawkins, on Twitter. Quote, I feel like I got my ass handed to me by a bunch of Vikings. What an experience. The Viking experience. Coming to a town near you. Didn't they just win the NXT Tag Team Championships? They just won the NXT Tag Team Championships. So I don't know if they're going to bounce around or not. I don't know how that's going to work now. Who knows if they know how it's going to work now? I have a feeling that they don't. But we'll find out. Vince McMahon's big announcement. What could his big announcement be? Actually, before I get to that, too, because somebody did note this, and this is probably the case. Lance Peterson at SMU Heavyweight, who I would suggest you follow on Twitter if you are even the smallest fan of the history of world-class wrestling. Lance went to a ton of shows, and at some point I'm going to call him and make him come on this radio show and talk to me about his memories of world-class championship wrestling. But he did note that it seems like losing the spectacle of everyone chanting war is the real downer. Do you think the word war was a problem? Yeah, I do. I think that was the biggest problem. They're funny about that. They can make a joke about disemboweling somebody after just getting back from Saudi Arabia, after an American citizen and a journalist was murdered at the behest, allegedly, of Saudi Arabia. They'll joke about that, but they don't like the word war in there. If I'm not mistaken, they took that out after 9/11. Because Raw, if you've never noticed this or not, and I assume that everybody that's listening to this show has, they do show the graphic and the credit after each hour. I believe they still do that. They most certainly did it for years and years and years and years. They're separate shows. That's why they get 3 different ratings, hour 1, hour 2, and hour 3. And WWE is obviously not the only one that does this. Everybody does this. One of the reasons why is to manipulate ratings. And after 9/11, that went away. There was no more war zone. There was no more Raw is War. And I think that is the biggest thing. Now, why they couldn't come up with another idea for a name, I don't know. And again, is it the biggest thing in the world? No. But when the Gaga matters so much, that's the best you could come up with. And again, I bet you somebody was cracking jokes and they were going through names and they went through Rock and Roll Express, Midnight Express, every Express tag team that's ever existed in the world. Somebody probably said Viking Express, and they had to tweak it to Experience. I don't know. I really don't know. But that's what they is. Will they be the biggest news coming out of Raw? We'll see. Tonight, the biggest news coming out of SmackDown is supposed to be a big name. What big name will that be? Personally announced by Vince McMahon. I'm betting we're going to get a partial tease. Watch Big Show, his music hit or something like that, and he strolls out. I don't know if that's the case. I don't think he'd be an active competitor, really. But as a sight gag, I could see it happening. But I think the announcement's going to be Brock Lesnar. It just makes sense. He doesn't have to be there right now. They're moving to Fox in the fall. I honestly believe, with every fiber of my being, that Daniel Cormier at some point is going to end up somewhere in the mix in the WWE. Maybe it's going to be a lot later. Maybe it ends up being closer to Royal Rumble or something like that. But whether any fight in UFC actually happens or not, just the thought of Cormier and his fandom and that sort of thing, and the sports connection that Fox wants to push, and to me, it just screams like it would make a lot of sense. So that's my prediction on who the big name is going to be. I'd like to get yours as well, 1-800-878-PLAY, 1-800-878-7529. Get a hold of me on Twitter as well, always available there, at Sempervive. Sitting Duck in Vancouver. Duck, what's up?
How's it going, buddy?
It's going.
It's going. Your call guy had that a little wrong. It's Vancouver Island, and that's quite a distinction there. You got to know that.
Aye. So what would the major difference be then for those of us ignorant on geography?
Well, I guess it's like the islands are always a little different. So if you were in New York City, everyone says people from Staten Island are a little, they're a little different. So I guess that's the main distinction I would say here. Let me put it this way. I woke up this morning and I thought, what would be nice if I were to go fishing? So I just walked out here, and honestly, I'm calling you right now from Lake Cowichan, and I'm having a little fishing. I'm in a boat, so you could call it a Viking experience, if you will. There you go. See, it all comes back together, and that brings me to my topic. Has there ever been a worse tag team name? This could be the worst one ever. I'm not.
Is it that bad?
It's awful. It takes their gimmick, and not only there's names that could ignore their gimmick, which would be better. This doesn't just ignore their gimmick; it almost makes it seem ridiculous. Like Viking Experience is almost like a ride at Universal Studios, or an escape room you have to go to, like a Viking themed escape room. It's just
somebody on the board made a good point. It's like something you'd pay extra for at a brothel. And it's,
That's right. That's right. You get the normal stuff for this much money, and then you get for an extra $50, they'll give you the Viking Experience. I like that. That's not bad. I'm thinking this is the worst one ever. And you know what? Anyone who hears me, who's on the line, who's ready to call in, tell me a worse one, because I'll be listening to the rest of the show. Honestly, I can't think of a worse one in all of wrestling history. And
Doug,
there's the Dongs or whatever, but that was a joke name. We're talking actual serious tag team names. This is the worst ever.
How old? I don't want to call you out, but how old are you, or how deep does your wrestling knowledge run? Because there are teams like the PYTs, the Pretty Young Things of Coco Ware and Overall Austin, that the team itself was great, but I guess you could.
That's a cool name. That's a Michael Jackson song.
Fair enough. That's true. Although Norval Austin was not pretty nor young at the time.
I'm 35, so I my history goes back quite a ways. I've been watching as long as I've been able to. So for me, I can't think of a worse name other than, of course, the joke names, which I mentioned, the Dongs and the Ding Dongs or whatever they were. That's obviously a worse name, but it was meant it was manufactured to be worse. It was a joke name. I'm saying for serious names, Viking Experience is so bad, because if they change it to something else, there'll always be the Viking Experience. Now I understand why they had to change from War Machine. And I'm surprised, going through Twitter, how few people actually know why, the real reason why they had to switch from War Machine. And I support that decision. I don't want any association with that Noppenhaver guy whatsoever. You want that as far away from you as possible. But even if they just wanted Viking in the name, like Viking Raiders, that's fine. You know? Or just
I would have thought so. I just thought there's more things. And Doc, I want to thank you very much for the call. You're right. I don't know how they came up with that one. I don't know how that sounds like an intimidating name for two guys who look like that. You know what I mean? I mean, the assassins were assassins. I don't know. I honestly don't know. Although if they came around today, they weren't always the bushwhackers. Would the New Zealand Kiwi sheep herders strike fear in anybody's hearts? Probably not. Goofy name. You know, the Royal Kangaroos. Well, I guess if you're two bouncy high flyers or something like that. But I definitely get what Doug's saying. You know, when it comes to guys that, like, you're supposed to be your big monstrous tag team, or they're your new big monster tag team. They just beat your tag team champions. They're the NXT tag team champions. They supposedly eat raw meat, and instead they sound like, you know, the side chick to medieval times. I am just salivating over the chance that we revisit this show next year for next year's Superstar Shakeup, and Viking Experience is still the biggest news to come out of it. Back to the phone lines now. Jim in Virginia. Jim, how are you, sir?
Hey, how you doing today, Mike? Just thinking about Sasha Banks. You reckon she can make it as Mercedes KV again?
Yes. You know, that's where, you know, her luck of her government and name that the parents gave her of Mercedes is great. It's a great, easy name that sounds flashy, and, you know, the on the shirt and all that sort of stuff too. If that's the role she decides to take, you know, boss Mercedes, you know, whatever. I mean, however you want to play it, I absolutely think she will, because she's still. I know that it's going to be hard not to call her Sasha, you know, for a lot of fans, because she gained a lot of fans as Sasha, but she's gained a lot of fans, and she's got one of the best bases, or at least one of the most vocal bases out there, whether you think they're annoying or not, whether they have bothered you or not, whether you think they're the best thing in the world, and you're all in their Bayhive, in Sasha's Bayhive. However, you know, and Jim, I want to thank you very much for the call.
Take
Unfortunately,
care.
We're rolling to break here, but yeah, I mean, because of her fan base, whatever she's lost now with WWE, I mean, if she were to walk out tomorrow, she'll still have her fan base. Of course, we don't know how long her contract's for, but she's got some time to breathe. We're going to breathe right now in this break. We'll be back.
You are listening to Wrestling Observer Live with Brian Alvarez and Mike Sempervive on the Sports Byline Broadcasting Network.
Jay Luffy on Twitter. The Boston Hug connection is miles worse. A little birdie reminded me. That little birdie's got a buzz cut, by the way. Actually, is he completely bald now? He's got a little hair up there. Lance Storm reminded me of Techno Team 2000. That's probably worse. In fact, that is worse. Worse gimmick, too. Because here's the thing. As dopey as a name as Viking Experience may be, the team itself is pretty great. Techno Team 2000 was not. You know who else wasn't? The Dicks. Remember them? No? Do you remember Jim and I? How about the Johnsons? Complete with Mortimer Plumtree in Impact / TNA in the early years. The West Hollywood Blondes. Lenny and Lodi. Lance, no offense. The Un-Americans was not so good. So there's been some rough ones. Who was the other guy in Techno Team 2000? Like, always remember, it's Eric Watts and somebody. I can never remember the other dude. Not that he really needed to be remembered. No offense to you. I hope you're well. Somebody note here, the Mean Street Posse. Take that back. The name was great. The gimmick was great. The music was great. The wrestling was not great. But seeing them get beaten up was great. Pete Gas. 1-800-878-PLAY if you want to join me. 1-800-878-7529. Even producer Dom is into this right now. Biscuits and Gravy, Jesse and Festus. But see, the song was called Biscuits and Gravy. They were just Jesse and Festus. Unless you're saying Jesse and Festus was a hideous name. Is that what you're saying, producer Dom? That's what he's saying. Yep. Chad Fortune. Thank you, Carl. Carl Carlson, saving the day. Chad Fortune. I'll be damned. I remember him doing like some WCW like Saturday night jobs. I think he did some jobs on like Nitro and stuff like that too. I know that name. Can't remember what else he did now, but now that I heard it, so yeah. Not a memorable tag team. Like the Zan Panzer of tag teams. That was an awful gimmick as well, too. Zan Panzer. I think there was a guy who paid was it the Panzer Flute or something? I remember those dopey commercials airing during wrestling, and then all of a sudden it's Ole Anderson's kid is Zan Panzer, the mask gimmick that was not good. Mr. Fibbles on Twitter. Triple fail on Raw, Viking experience and individual names. AJ coming out mid-Shield promo and caption telling us the Usos when it's Bobby Roode and Gable. Very WCW. Boss Man, if you had a chance, if you're a subscriber, WrestlingObserver.com. But you got double last night. You got Dave and Garrett. And by the way, you're getting Dave and Garrett tonight, too, after SmackDown. And you're getting Brian and Dave on Wednesday night. But you got Figure 4 Daily and Wrestling Observer Radio last night. And, yeah, Brian, welcome to WCW. Noted, too, you know, they're relying on WCW people that became Impact people and have been out on the scene for a long time for AEW. Your Keith Mitchells and such. And I ask myself, is there not anybody else out there new, with new ideas and new thoughts? Not making the same old mistakes that we would see on WCW and Impact sometimes? I don't know. Surprised they went that direction, but I guess really not. You know, the women's tag team that could be brought up, the obvious one I think everybody in Montreal would want to hear, and I shouldn't say everybody, but, you know, Io Shirai and Kairi Sane. Boy, that would be a good one. Instantly, everybody's better. And the thing about the women that work in Stardom, you know, it's almost ridiculous how young some of the girls and guys start off in a legitimate promotion. It's not like people are starting off in the backyard and then hit a training school and is let in at like 17 or 18. You know, there's some people in Stardom 14, 15, 16, and they're not in the mix or anything like that. You know, their whole gimmick is that they're learning to wrestle and they're young kids and, you know, that they have drive and enthusiasm and let's see what happens. But no offense to the Iconics, I think they could use all the help that they could get in wrestling matches. The Iconics gimmick, I thought, I knew wrestling-wise they weren't ready, and it was, you know, before they were even called up. I mean, people just, Billy Kay being the biggest light of this, they're just not ready for prime time. I kind of thought the gimmick was. I think the gimmick still can be. But they're not good, and they don't have good matches, and they're not fun matches. So to bring up a Shirai and a Kairi Sane, boy, that can fix a lot of things and can hopefully cover some things up. Now, again, I don't know if they're going to go in that direction. There's a lot of different directions that they could go in, including keeping both of them down in NXT. And then having them feud at some point against each other. They did tease that a little bit during TakeOver, with both of them going after the Women's Championship. But we'll have to see. I'm interested to see if the Revival come over tonight. You know, that was teased last night. I don't know if it was teased to the point where I don't think it's going to happen and we may get like Roode and Gable over or something like that. But I don't know. Sanity. Now that they've been beaten up by The Miz, and now that Eric Young's been announced to go over on Raw, do they end up back in NXT? Because I think that they should. especially if the War Raiders are coming up, which they are. Sanity doesn't necessarily need Eric Young down in NXT. And they'd be probably far better off down there. I'm not trying to take money out of their pocket or anything, but, let's face facts here. You were what got The Miz over as a badass heel or badass babyface. Still trying to figure out how he busted his head last night. I think it was when, Dave blamed Shane. I don't know if it was Shane with an errant punch or if it was really when Miz went ass over tea kettle and Shane pushed him over the guardrail if he didn't donk his head or something like that or cut it. Go back to the phone lines now, 1-800-878-PLAY, 1-800-878-7529. Marcelo in Denver. Marcelo, how are you today?
Hey, I'm good, Mike. How are you, man? You feeling any better?
Yeah, a little bit better than yesterday, although part of my head is still clogged up. But this Mucinex Sudafed combination seems to be doing its trick.
Of course, man. So I want to throw in a name over there, Sports Entertainment Extreme.
Oh, yeah, that's... fun matches, for anybody out there that doesn't remember this combination, the early days of NWA TNA, when they were on weekly pay-per-views, Vince Russo, it was said not to be involved, but it was hard to not believe that he was involved, when you had a faction named Sex, and the tag team was Elix Skipper, it was Christopher Daniels, and it was Low-Key, which it was a very eclectic combination, but if I recall correctly, the reason it was done was because I think it was Low-Key was the one who was the most booked and the most active at the time, maybe with Ring of Honor or something like that. I think he was the reason that they ended up having a 3-person unit where if Daniels had bookings or if Low-Key had bookings, somebody else could slide in there with Elix Skipper. But yeah, that was in hindsight, as many of those names that Vince Russo came up with, quite the unfortunate name. Is Marcelo gone? Marcelo's gone. He was tired of my dissertation upon SEX. Maybe he wanted to give it. I apologize, Marcelo. Mr. Fibbles on Twitter again. I didn't even mention Balor losing just after winning the IC Championship and the Iconics losing after getting the tag titles. Are the Iconics worse than Lacey? He didn't like this show at all. Here's the thing with the Balor thing. Look, he dominated Bobby Lashley. He won it quick. He is Finn Balor, so he's already got a built-in base that people he is. I'm not saying he's Teflon or anything like that, but him dropping this to Andrade, especially when he fought out of Andrade's finisher, and it was a pretty good back and it wasn't great or anything, but I mean, for an average TV match, good to get Andrade established, and they did some cool things. And yes, I want to see more. It was cool that way. So I'm actually okay with that, although I do get it as far as the title goes, but how the titles go. I mean, look at the Iconics and the tag titles. And them losing. Are they worse than Lacey? Lacey seems to be more athletic by leaps and bounds than both the other two combined, in my opinion. But it doesn't mean that she's ready to go. 2 knees onto Natalia's gut yesterday was a good example of that. But those things happen. It's wrestling. This ish happens. For those who didn't see it, Lacey Evans faced Natalya. Said that she was it over the hill and classless? To which Renee Young responded, "She's not over the hill, or she's not classless. It's just yesterday's garbage. Just old news." But the match itself wasn't awful. She's just going to have to be led. I mean, she shouldn't be there. Not because, again, like a lot of people, that's what NXT was supposed to be for, to get them ready. Lacey Evans, it just was one of the better examples of somebody brought up for no real reason other than Vince saw them, liked them, and went, yeah. I mean, look at Heavy Machinery. What was the point of bringing them up? What was the point of bringing Sanity up, really? Nikki Cross? Boy, I'd like to see her involved in the mix at some point. Send her back down to NXT. Please? Savannah, New Jersey. Dynamic Dudes is a worse name. Rybaxel is another one. I forgot about Rybaxel. Ryback and Curtis Axel. Two members of Paul Heyman's WWE Dangerous Alliance he'd like to forget. And Dynamic Dudes was a hideous name. Well, Savant didn't note the Minnesota Wrecking Crew, too. That's a bad name. I disagree. And the reason I disagree is, one, they were brought in, I think, as at the time noted henchmen of Ole Anderson, but also the fact that it was the Destruction Crew. So I'm going to give them a little bit of a break there. Mike Enos and Wayne Bloom. The Viking Experience. We'll be back. Wrestling Observer Live. Producer Dom reminded me of Foxana. Alicia Fox and Oksana. It's really just popped me because somebody remembered Oksana. The Shining Stars is another one he mentioned. Look at you, Producer Dom. You have completely just screwed your brain all up. The Cologne selling timeshares. Bad gimmicks and bad names. Mr. Foible's having a hell of a day here. Great reminder of the Voodoo Kin Mafia. VKM, Vince's initials. Also, another NWA TNA special. When the Road Dogg, Jesse James, Brian Armstrong was BG James. I think Derek Bergen called Big Gut James. I thought that was mean, Derek. But yeah, I can't remember what was Billy Gunn's name. I can't remember. Somebody will remind me after the show. It doesn't matter. What matters is, though, SmackDown is tonight with Night 2 of the Superstar Shakeup. This 2003 Shakeup, free agency, this is not. When Stephanie poached Brock Lesnar from Raw and made him exclusive to SmackDown under the nose of Eric Bischoff and driving off in a limo with Brock and Paul Heyman as the undisputed champion, which opened the door for Triple H to be awarded his championship, which led to the split championships and the loss of what was a really awesome-looking belt, too, that Brock had. Yeah, that show last night was not. Maybe they can add some drama tonight, but we'll see. I want to thank everybody out there for joining me today. As always, we're here with you every day, Monday through Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, noon Pacific. Sunday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, 3 Pacific, 10 GMT. I want to thank Producer Dom and all of you for joining me today. We will be back tomorrow. I will talk to you again after a while.
And you came along as usual and spoiled all the fun. So this is where we get to talk about your big brass cojones you always like to brag about. You see, we're going to lay it all on the table. And we're going to issue right now what I'd like to call the $1 Million Challenge.
What? $1 Million Challenge?
Let me reiterate, Vince McMahon. The $1 Million Challenge.
What's this about?
You see, you got nothing to lose for this one, Benny Mac, so we're really going to test how big they are. We offering you, we have got with the bean counters and the upper echelon here at Total Nonstop Action, and they know how we feel personally, and so by God, unlike you ever did, they're supporting us. Let's get back to the $1 Million Challenge. You see, Vince, we got a problem. You want us to stop, and we want you to stop. Every week, you are chopping at the very foundation of the dynasty, of the legacy that we were damn sure a major part of. So we have got a proposition that is legitimate and a proposition that you cannot refuse. You see, it don't matter if it's in your house. It don't matter if it's in our house. It don't matter if it's in the hot damn outhouse. We will put up $1 million. $1 million. These two son of a bitches right here versus your two boys. Anywhere.
Wow, that's a challenge.
No, hit me with this one. You see, this ain't a damn wrestling match. Oh no, hell no. No angles, no spots, no finish. Just men versus you two pussies. And if you got what it takes, then by God, you bring that crap. Vince McMahon, let's see how big your balls are. You accept our challenge, or you prove to the world that you're a gutless piece of shit.
Oh.